So I'm going to try filming this from a little different angle and see how this works out. Hopefully you'll be able to see better what I'm doing. The first thing we're going to do is mount this guy, which is honestly one of the hardest parts to fabricate of this whole project. And because it's kind of a weird shaped hole and there's no readily available punches that are the right size for these things that are this shape, at least not without spending like $1,000, I'm going to use the same punch that we use for the octal sockets, which is a, let me look at the size here, 1 3/16. Because if we look at, this is real close to the dimensions of this. So we can start off with a round hole that's real close and then work from there. One thing you need to be aware of with these Hammond chassis is on this side, they've folded over this side underneath here and created this seam, and you can see that they've spot welded it in 2 places here. Well, this is double thick over about that far across. And so we do not want to get into this double thick stuff, even with the hold down screws. And so the best thing to do is get your caliper and come in here and measure that depth from this lip to there. And then we know how deep that is. And it's, I mean, I switch back and forth between using millimeters and inches, which as long as you know that you're doing that, it's okay to do. It's about 9 millimeters. So we know that we don't want to go into that edge. The other thing that you want to do before you even start is look at the chassis and see which side you want to use for the front. Now this one, I don't know exactly how it got in here, but there's a little scratch right here. And this side's perfectly clean. So we're going to make this the front. So that means we're going to be doing all the work here in the back. And don't get spun around. I remember Mark at Blue Glow was building an amp, doing it on a video, and he got kind of spun around and drilled the wrong side of the chassis. It's real easy to do because you're looking at it backwards right now. So we know the power transformer's going right here, and the output transformers are going here. So we want to put this IEC connector over here. And we know we don't want to get any closer than 9 millimeters. So let's go ahead and go like 13 millimeters, which is a ½ an inch over from this edge of where we want the edge of this to be. And so if we know that we're going to be a ½ inch over, or 13 millimeters, let's stick with millimeters. So if you look at it like that, it's 44 millimeters wide. And so if we do the math, that's, if it's 14 millimeters from this edge, just to keep the math simple, and then it's 44 millimeters wide, half of this would be 22 millimeters, and then we would add 22 to 14 and come up with 36 millimeters from the edge. And let's see if that looks. And that looks like the middle. And then this is, that's plenty far from the edge. So let's go with 36 millimeters from this edge for the center of this So we're going to make a little mark there. And I like putting these things down towards the bottom, like this. And we want the fuse at the bottom and the grounding terminal at the top, because if you look at this other side, we want all the power terminals over here on this side of the amplifier. So we want to put this thing in like this and put it down towards the bottom a little bit. And the height of this thing is, let's say it's 34 millimeters. And then half of that would be 17 millimeters. That looks right. Okay, so it's 17 millimeters, and we know we want this thing to be, we don't want to get too close to this bottom edge. We want it spaced about like that. And so that's 8 millimeters, and then we add that to 17 millimeters, and we get 25 millimeters. And holding it up there, that looks pretty centered to me. It's just a little below center. I'm going to go ahead and go down to like 22 millimeters. Let's say 23. And just see what that's going to look like. I mean, that should be good. I'm pretty sure these holes are halfway across. Yep. So these holes are the midpoint vertically. So if we mark it like that, we'll be down here on this bottom edge. I'm going to go up just a little bit. I'm going to go to 24 millimeters. Center that on 24. And that should keep us away from this double edge that's 14 millimeters with this screw hole. That looks like the spot to me. So the next step is get a piece of wood that's just long enough to sit in here and support the backside of this while we are doing our center punching. We hold our center punch right there. Because this is steel, I'm going to use the hammer and punch method instead of my little automatic center punch, so I get a really good punch. Like that. Now you can see you need to be careful. It's real easy to like super dent this thing where you would end up being visible on the smaller holes. So you don't need to smack it that hard. And I probably need to find a little bit better piece of wood to support the backside so it doesn't do this when we're doing like the little small holes on each side, or just don't smack it as hard. So we're going to start off with drilling our first hole. Okay, there's our first hole, and we've got to get it this big for pulling this punch through it. So go into my drill box, and we're probably going to go up a step or two at a time. I think that first bit I was using was a little dull. And then this one's going to be real close. We might have to go up one more size. See, again, I did a really crappy job with that. See how I twisted the metal on the chassis? That's not something you want to do. And I was pushing down too hard when I was starting this hole, and it's like pulled this edge up. But it doesn't matter because we're on this because we're punching a big hole. But if we were doing something that was more like the speaker jacks, then we would have had to have got a hammer and dolly and flatten that hole back out. Which you can do, but it's not ideal. So again, when you're drilling bigger holes like this, get a little speed up and then run the bit in without so much pressure. I think that's real close. I'm just going to get this little round file, and actually that won't go through there. We're just going to give it a little of that action. Get this bolt where it'll go through. Then, one of the things you want to do when you're using a punch on something like this, you want to get a piece of paper and use it to protect the surface from the dye marring up the powder coating. The other thing you want to make sure you do too is that you get all these metal chips out of the way so you don't smush them in. I'm actually going to get something and get rid of that little burr that's sticking up there too. I just don't like it. That's just asking for you to get your finger caught on that. And here's the most hated tool on the channel, my little channel locks, and get rid of that little piece of metal. I don't know why everybody hates my channel locks, but people just have to get over it. So you put the cutter on the underside and the die on the top, and you wiggle a little bit as you're getting close. And then try to keep this parallel to this as you're turning it. And don't put a ton of pressure on it, just slowly turn it around. And you'll hear it pop once. There's the first pop, and you'll hear a second pop. And there's our hole. And as you can see, it's offset just a little bit towards the bottom. Now when we hold this up, we can see that we've got the vertical height already there. And we have the horizontal already there. What we don't have are the corners. And to get there, get a fairly fine, I think this is a 3/8 rat, not a rat tail, just a square, straight file, straight round file. And you just start working in the corner. because this is steel, the aluminum is a lot easier to file out like this, but with steel chassis, it's just going to take a little more work. And the other file we have is this flat file. And then you can come in and flatten off those edges there. So you just work back and forth between these two until you get this bottom edge where it needs to be. And don't work on like the upper end of this thing. It's real easy to pull this out and then go bam and jam it in here and really destroy the finish here. You know, use the lower part of the file down here to keep from that happening. And I do the bottom part first because it's more square. This actually, we only need to probably put two little kind of nicks up here to get it where it needs to be. Okay, now you can see the bottom edge is going down in here. But I'm going to go ahead and go down with this bottom edge until this top edge, I can see the edge of this hole when I look down and have it sitting in here. So we still got a little ways to go. At this point we have the width, so we want to start working on going down. And I mean, you could do the whole thing with this flat file. I found it easier to like use the round file and then use the flat file to like take off these little high spots here. Slow and steady wins the race. And know that like there's just a very little edge here that's like the safety margin. But in here you've got a lot more kind of safety margin to overcome any, you know, slight mistakes you might make. This is what needs to be like parallel to the bottom of this. I think part of this too may be my old flat file is a little too fine for doing this work. I may need to, next time I'm at the hardware store, look at getting a better flat file. Just a little bit more down and we're good. gonna be fun editing the audio to get all this super loud noise out. Okay. So I think now I'm ready to start working on the top. And again, there's two corners that need to be worked on because this is kind of a cathedral tape shaped top. So I put the socket in and I mark the direction that those little high spots are, so I know where to file. I mean, do you know that it's possible that you are going to nick this finish? And if you do, it can be touched up with a little black paint and it's really just not that visible, so don't be like super paranoid. So at this point, we're just kind of roughing in this shape. And let me find my other little flat file that I use for doing these top corners. And this little guy works great for doing these top corners. And as you can see, it's starting to get the right shape. We need a little bit on this side over here, and we're probably going to be good. Like that. Yep, take off this little piece of meat in the middle here. And there we are. And as you can see, this hole isn't pretty. See if I can get a little piece of paper behind it here so you can see it. I mean, that hole's not, it's not perfectly shaped. when you put this little guy over the top of it, you can't see any of the edges. So don't think you got to make this little hole perfect. Just get it where this will sit in here, and there's a little bit of slop here where I can get this, you know, like where it's parallel, and then mark the 2 holes. And for doing that, I just use a little small screwdriver because I can get in here and trying to make a little cross. And if I see it's off a little bit, which this one is, then I come out and correct the mark, put that back over. It's right in the center. Do the same over here on this side. Back in. Well, guys, I looked up and my battery died right as I was getting ready to drill these 2 holes. But I don't feel like I need to go back and like do this on another chassis. I think I showed y'all 90% of cutting this hole out, which is really the hard part. Once you mark these 2 holes, I got like this piece of wood and another piece of wood, or you could get one of these that's a little longer, but I keep some of these around just so I can stack them up and get the height I need. The main thing is you want all the weights supported right there. And you can see like the corner of the piece of wood's right here. And then you get center punch and go tap, tap, tap. Do both of them. Be kind of gentle on these so you don't bend this metal all in. And then get a really small bit. I use like a 5/64 to drill like the pilot hole. And just put like a mark. Don't drill all the way through to start with. And then put this back up and make sure that your mark is in the center of these holes. And I'm going to blame it for trying to video this and talk and do all at the same time. This one hole was down just a little bit from where it should be. And I went ahead and drilled out the pilot hole. And once you drill the pilot hole, you're kind of stuck with where it ends up. So what I ended up doing was I drilled this one out to 1/8 inch, and then this one I did too. And then you did this action like this, and then like this, and then, well, let me show you maybe from the side. I did like this action, then like this action, and then did like this as I was pushing up to slot this hole just a little bit, and it fits perfectly fine now. And there's enough of this around where you can't see where that was slotted out. And again, this isn't some of my proudest work, but as you can see, it doesn't have to be perfect. So don't be scared of this. I mean, it doesn't have to be like CNC machined beautiful, because this thing does have an edge around it. Just be careful on this top and the bottom that this is fairly flat, so that once it's in place, you can't see anything. So once you get past this, I like doing this first, because to me, this is the hardest part of doing this build. So I'm going to clean my workbench off and get ready to do the RCA jacks and the speaker jacks. This may be 20 minutes of a video. I'll have to go ahead and edit this. If it is, hope you're enjoying this build. There's probably going to be a lot of episodes. if I'm going to be going into this much detail and showing you like every minute of the fab work. So hope you're enjoying this. If you are, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and I'll see you soon for some more 6SQ7 fun.